I know there's a few more coming in, but we wanted to be sensitive to everyone's time. If you haven't found a seat and you want a seat, there are a few here, on the ends, and then over here. Feel free to find a seat you like. Well, I'm one of the pastors here at the Lakeview Christian Ministries, and we are delighted in a way just to open up our building and to give everyone here an opportunity just to remember Hannah. And we are so sorry for your loss, and we want to be just a safe place for you, just to remember, to cry, but to have hope. And so there's two main things we'd like to see. We talked to the family this week, and we'd like everyone to have an opportunity to remember her. We'd also like to have an opportunity tonight at a terrible event like this, just to stop and just to kind of take an assessment of our life, and just to think about our own journey here. And so the parents and I, we talked about that, and we hope that those two goals are accomplished today. We hope that this will be a good time to remember her, to keep those positive memories alive, but also a time for us to just take stock of our lives. Actually, in the Bible, it talks about that. It talks about how at a time of mourning, there's this natural process of just taking stock of our own life and realizing that our lives are all going to come to an end. And as unpleasant as that thought is, it's true. And so, a time like this is a good time for that kind of reflection. So, we hope that you find this place an atmosphere where you're welcomed, and that we can be your hosts as a community of Lakeview. I personally didn't have a chance to know her. From what I've heard, she was an outstanding young lady. And so there are going to be several people that are going to speak tonight, and we're actually going to have an opportunity later for others to speak as well, who would like to. Right now, I'd like to ask Ron to come up.
My name is Ron Rogers. I'm the chaplain with the Salvation Army. This needs to be closer, like that. I'm the chaplain with the Salvation Army in North Las Vegas. And it's my honor to be able to be part of this celebration of life. One of the great things about a Christian memorial is that we mourn, and we mourn together, because it's heartbreaking. But we also rejoice because the one that we love is in the hands of the God who loves her and will be forever. And so feel free to mourn, cry, laugh, because I'm sure there's going to be some great stories about Hannah later on, and lots of opportunity to laugh and enjoy her. Hannah Banana Quinn was born on July 15, 1993, and died August 18, 2012. She's survived by her mother, Lacey Quinn, in Clarksville, Tennessee, and her dad, Bruce Quinn, living here in Henderson, and her stepmom, Corey Brooks, her sister, Katie, and her brothers Joshua and Jeremiah, all in Clarksville. Grandparents Janet Funk and Joel Hyatt. Everything I've read that many of you have written in her Facebook pages, this was a remarkable young woman. I'm going to share some of those things. I'm sure you'll be able to embellish later on. This young man said, "You are one of those rare people that make an imprint on everyone's life who knew you." Young lady says, "You were like my big sister, always sticking up for me against bullying. You always made me smile and laugh. You were my first friend to introduce me to others when I was new at basic. You made me a better person." Hannah, you will never be forgotten. You always made me laugh when you did come to school. Don't turn into a zombie, though. I know you're capable of it. You guys probably know what he's talking about. You stuck up for me in 8th grade. What a great young lady. You were always there to talk to me. When I think about you, Hannah, we were in 7th grade, you had just moved here. I thought you were pretty cool and invited you to sit at our lunch table. You asked tons of questions about where you're from and what you were like, and told you a lot about myself, and I swear that talk was the first time in history I felt that someone had actually understood me and why I was the way I was. We were both different and special, but that was okay with you. Young man says, "I just don't get why good people have to leave this planet so early. I don't want to doubt faith, but life is cruel sometimes. There are always lots of whys at a time when we lose somebody important to us. I don't know that there are any real good answers. But the best thing that can happen is if we can huddle with each other, look out for each other, hug each other, talk to each other, listen to each other, pray for each other, be with each other. That's the best thing y'all can do. And that's why we're here." Dave Gallegos.
First call up Pastor Brado. You want to be able to begin?
Would you bow with me for prayer? Oh God, our hearts are heavy. And Lord, even in a time like this when our hearts are so heavy, and we hear about what an amazing young lady Hannah was, God, even in these times, we do have hope. Father, I just want to pray that the hope of Jesus Christ would be clear tonight. Lord, for everyone here, that we would be able to celebrate her life, as short as it was, as precious as it was, to hold on to that. And Lord, to just understand how much you love us and how you haven't abandoned us even in our time of pain. Father, would you just be our comfort today? God, we thank you so much for the hope that we have in Jesus. We thank you that we know Hannah knew Jesus. And that she's with you. God, would you just be present in this room? It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Welcome, family and friends. This room tonight is filled with tons of people who knew and loved Hannah. I am also one of those people. Just like many of friends and family, we have a lot of also staff members from Basic High School. I teach and I coach at Basic. Hannah knew me as coach, even though I wasn't her coach. I was always coaching the classroom. I'm one of Hannah's teachers for Basic High School. I'm also a member and deacon of the church at Lake Moody. Here, this is my home. So only Hannah could put this all together. I was telling Dad, just by coincidence, I find out more and more, about Hannah through all this. When I graduated high school, just happens to be when Hannah was born. This happens to be my home, and today also happens to be my birthday. I'd rather not be anywhere else than here. Like I said, I'm also a member and deacon of the church at Lake Mead. As we say our goodbyes, I know I will see her again. Until that time, we have set up a Facebook check-in in honor of her life. At this time, I invite you to take out your cell phone and go to Facebook. We all know how much she loved Facebook. Then I ask, as you pull out your phones, this is the time that is appropriate. Usually we're doing the opposite. Usually we're saying, put them away, I'm talking, put them away. Now in Hannah's honor, I'm going to ask that you pull out your cell phones. You're going to go to check in. Search for Hannah Quinn's Memorial Service. When you find it, please check in to honor her life. Thank you. Where is okay, please?
In our nation, we take pride in being free, but the sad fact is that millions of Americans, children, teens, and adults, are anything but free. This evening, I've been invited to share some of my life story, the search I made for years to have freedom. It's my hope and prayer that someone here tonight has helped in their journey to freedom. I was born and raised in Las Vegas, Nevada, December 10th, 1969. My mother's name was Marlene Porcinelli. I never knew my father. My grandparents were Henry and Teresa Porcinelli, and I come from an Italian Catholic background. To start off, my mother, I'll talk about my mother. My mother wasn't anything nice. She was a very sick woman, and my childhood was filled with very sadistic abuse. She was a biker who ran with bikers, the real bad kind. She ran with a known motorcycle gang in the 70s, and back then there weren't any nice bikers. From age 5 and on, I knew all about sex and was beaten regularly, to say the least. Weekends were filled with bonfires and Harleys and rock and roll, and lots of drugs and alcohol and bad men. I didn't have any friends. No one was allowed to play with me unless we were in the circle, and I was never invited to anyone's house or birthday parties or sleepovers, and no one dared let their kids come to my house, wherever it might be that month. I started growing up at the age of 5. I was in kindergarten. My mother would get tired of having me around, and so she would drop me off at my grandparents for periods of time, saying that she'd be right back, but we never knew when she would be back. Sometimes it was hours, sometimes it was days, sometimes it was weeks. These visits to my grandparents were the only time I experienced any real love or peace. Being with my grandparents was the only time I ever felt safe. And I remember my grandmother would talk to me about God. She taught me how to get on my knees at night and talk to someone who wasn't there. And she taught me to give thanks every time before we ate, And I did the motions, but I didn't really understand. And then my mother would show back up and root me back into her world. This was her cycle, heartbreaking to my grandparents as well as me. By the time I was 8, my mother had given birth to my little sister and shortly after was diagnosed with colon cancer and was in complete denial about it. Life went on the way it always did, and we continued to move around. Life centered around drugs and alcohol and bad men and abuse. In the end, she dragged us to California, and we lived in an abandoned house with no electricity or hot water. Here I did my best to take care of her and my little sister, who called me Mama by this time. A neighbor finally called the authorities. When they kicked in the door, my mother was brain dead. She didn't know who I was anymore. She didn't know anything anymore. My mother died at 29 years old, July 11th, 1978. They diagnosed her with colon cancer, but I say it was drug and alcohol addiction. The state of Nevada said my grandparents were too old to keep us both, and my little sister and me. So my grandmother, in fear that we would be separated, allowed a very quick private adoption to a local Mormon family. That way they could keep us together and still visit us. So now I've gone from being this Italian biker Catholic girl to my mother dies and I've been dragged around to now I'm Mormon. So all perfect, great stuff for future listeners. I'm sure you can imagine I did not fit in anywhere. I had no idea what was going on in the world. And behind closed doors with my new family came more physical and emotional abuse. I was a child with issues, and my new mother, she had been having 2 children before and didn't handle the stress very well. I believed I was cursed. I remember my grandmother cried one night and she told me that I was born under the wrong stars. And I believed she was right. They baptized me right away. I just smiled and did the motions. And again, through it all, found myself talking to someone who wasn't really there. But then something good happened. I discovered sports and dance. I found 2 areas where I felt like I belonged, and I excelled very quickly in both. I was the team captain. My number was number 1. And I was kind of cocky and good at everything I tried. I also was president of all my church classes for young women. I started to have friends through sports and dance. Finally, I had friends. The friends in my life at this time became like family to me. And here are the girls in my life who helped me to start a relationship with the Lord. I finally believed there was a God. At this time, I was learning how to be a leader. I was pretty popular right now, and I had goals and dreams for the first time, and I was going to change my stars. I remember a speaker came to my church and spoke to me and my friends, and she shared her story of a hard life and how she had overcome it. And I remember thinking, that will never happen to me. I've already been through this. But things at home behind closed doors were bad, and I'd had enough. And at age 15, I ran away for the first time and left for good shortly, right after my 16th birthday. For a while, I stayed in school, even tried night school, but eventually fell behind and dropped out. I entered the real world as a very young person. I remember thinking, freedom! I was free at last. I remember that feeling like it was yesterday, and I was determined to make it and leave my past behind, and therefore began my journey away from God without even realizing it. It started with the wrong boy. He was everything my grandparents and parents hated. Soon came alcohol and drugs, and nightclubs and parties that would last for days, fast cars, men, clothes, and the beginning of my bartending career, beginning with a fake ID. I discovered how to make money while I partied. I was moving around a lot. I was in control, so I thought. Drugs and alcohol were my master in reality. I thought I was having a good time. That's the lie that disease tells us. Or I thought at times I was blowing off steam. More lies I would tell myself. I remember thinking, I'm tough, I'll get through this. I'm going to make it. My 20s and 30s were full of ups and downs. I would date the wrong man, build a life, build stuff, but behind closed doors it would get unbearable. The abuse would be in full throttle. I would try and escape in alcohol and drugs. Life would explode, and I would run. I would be on the move again. I would leave everything behind and start all over, only to do the same thing again. Each time it got worse. Each time the abuse got deeper. I was getting tired of getting beat up and getting tired of starting over. But I would press on, being the true alcoholic I was. I was full of self-will. Eventually, I was on overload, barely holding on, fantasizing about suicide, but too chicken to really do it. My only true friend was alcohol. I'm in my 30s now. Where did the time go? Alcohol and drugs were my life. Then Mac came into my life. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time with all the wrong people, drunk, and Mac took me hostage and brutally raped me. He had me for 4.5 days. He was a blood. He was a gang member. He would laugh at me and say, "Where's your God now?" He told me he had plans for me. He told me he was going to kill me, but had changed his mind and decided to keep me for himself instead. He was going to turn me out, and for those of you who don't know what that means, I was about to become a working girl or a prostitute and be my pimp. Or he was going to kill me. How did I get here? Again. I felt like I was 5 to 9 years old again, just completely helpless. This wasn't supposed to happen to me. I was supposed to have changed my stars. Someone made an anonymous call to the Metro Police Department, and Metro got me out after having me 4.5 days, which was an eternity to me. But he soon got out and was looking for me, and I turned to more alcohol and drugs, and of course more bad men, and I was always running. And this went on for a couple of years, and through it all, I always had my friends, and my only constant companions, drugs and alcohol. Mac went on to kill and rape several other women, and raped a 17-year-old boy and murdered his drug dealer at a Walgreens parking lot at Chop in Decatur, to name only a few of the things he's done. It's a miracle in here. Mac's trial started a couple days ago, August 20th, after all these years. And I get to face this man and testify to what he did. And I get to be a credible witness today because I'm sober. Sorry. After what happened, I had lost my mind for a while. All I could do was drink and do more drugs. And I was now permanently living homeless on the streets, living in a drainage tunnel deep in a desert. And one day I was passing in front of a building on the edge of the desert, and I caught my reflection in a window. And I did not know who that was in that window. How did I get here? That's all I could say. Soon after this moment, I surrendered to God. I think it was more in frustration. I kind of waved my hands at the sky and I said, "Okay, what do you want me to do?" I give up. And this was the moment my life turned around. I no sooner said that, and a man approached me and he started to talk to me about God, and he invited me to a place called Central Christian. And he told me about a program there, a 12-step program called Celebrate Recovery. And I went, and this is where my life completely turned around. I just celebrated 3 years sobriety on May 10th. Hannah's not here today. I'm so sorry. And if she were here today, she would tell you she was sorry. But I am here to tell you, we only have today. I'd like to end with this. I read somewhere, we need not be afraid, for this is God's world. God is perfect reality and truth. He does not exist in fairy tales. He is pure light and our brightest hope. In His power, we can overcome any burdens. Obstacles are crushed. The need to escape disappears because He helps us find answers to our problems. He is the solution to all of our troubles. There is no wound too deep or tender that God can't repair. He sees that frayed fibers of our hearts, even the secret places that we are unaware of. He weeps when we hurt. His heart bleeds when we experience pain, and He longs to restore us. He created us to shine in happiness. And I believe this to be true. And I'm a living, breathing, standing testimony that this is true. Today I'm free. Thank you for listening.
Some may wonder why we chose to have Natalie share her story for Hannah. And I hope it's clear. I hope it's obvious. This is about hope. This memorial is about the hope that we have. As she said, Hannah isn't here. And memorial services are for those who are alive. And so today, it is my responsibility to talk about this hope, this thing that rescued Natalie from a life of drugs and alcohol, from a life of bondage and oppression. It all revolves around the most amazing man that ever lived. And that man's name is Jesus. His disciples, or his followers, they watched and they learned from this man Jesus. And one of those disciples, one of those followers, they wrote a book recording everything Jesus did and taught. And that book is called the Book of John, and it's in the New Testament. And in the New Testament, in this book of John, he recorded a story, an event that happened in the life of Jesus when he attended a funeral for one of his friends. Jesus had this reputation of being a healer. And whether you believe it or not, and I realize that some of the things in the Bible are hard to believe, but they happened. This is what the eyewitnesses wrote down. Jesus was known as someone who could heal sick people and even help blind people recover their eyesight. And Jesus had this reputation, and so one of his closest friends named Lazarus got sick, and they quickly sent word. I don't know about you, but if my friends were sick and I knew Jesus, and Jesus had a reputation as someone who could heal people, I would want to get word to Jesus, my friend's sick. And that's what they did. They sent a message, Jesus, your friend Lazarus, he's very sick. In fact, he'll die if you don't come. But strangely, and out of character really, Jesus doesn't immediately run to his friend. Instead, he waits. And as predicted, Lazarus dies. After about 4 days, Jesus travels to where Lazarus is, and his sister, Martha, comes running out. And she says what any of us would say, Jesus, if you had been here, I know if you had just been here, my brother wouldn't have died. And Jesus says to Martha some words that are so kind of mysterious at that time. He says, Martha, Martha, your brother will live again. And she, being the Jewish girl that she was, she said, yes, I know, one day there's a resurrection, I get it. One day I'll see him again, but it hurts, Jesus. And he says, no, Martha, that's not what I'm talking about. And he looks into her eyes and he says this powerful sentence. He says, Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. And if you believe in me, he that believes in me will never die. Do you believe this, Martha? And I think she just doesn't know what to say, and she says, okay, I guess I believe this, but I don't understand it. And then he goes in, and then Martha calls her other sister, Mary, and Mary runs out when she hears Jesus is there, and she says the same thing her sister says. She says, Jesus, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. And rather than going into the whole thing he just went into with Martha, he just simply says to Mary, Mary, where did they lay his body? Where did they lay him? And Jesus and Mary go walk